But getting back to our show, yes, in some ways, polyamory seems to be becoming much more mainstream. But does that mean that it's also becoming accepted and or, well, easier?
Nope.
Fair enough.
um, we're certainly seeing more representation of polyamory in mainstream media. It's almost always shown as a throuple, as a three-person relationship, closed throuple. They're not dating outside. It's just the three of them in love, acting like a monogamous couple, except there's one extra. And it's almost always depicted as one man and two women. So
And
polygamy light.
if it's closed, it's only because this existing cishet couple has found that unicorn that's going to change everything for them. At least in
Yeah.
terms of what's you see on TV, which I don't love, but
Right.
when I see something like, the Connors on ABC, or something that I think of as being like in every, suburban house in America, and I see them at least using the word throuple or having a conversation about polyamory, does that help and further the mission in any useful way, or does it just make it worse?
It lets people know that it exists. It's like the point at which in the early 80s, late 70s, there was a show called Soap in which Billy Crystal played a gay man. Okay,
no.
so we're at that spot where we're being made
Where it's so
aware that
far
these
away.
people
Okay.
exist. Okay,
Yeah.
so here's the thing about thruples. Thruples are polyamory on hard mode. That is the
Yeah.
hardest single way to do polyamory, and yet that's the one that the newbies all try.
Yep.
And they flame out spectacularly. Oh my God, terrible. I'm in some Facebook groups that are very large international Facebook groups with thousands and thousands of people in them. And in a couple of these, they get used as like agony aunt columns where people write in, and it's a lot of, AITA, questions, am I the jerk kind of questions. Or it'll be my nesting partner, blah, 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 a lot of that. And, hundreds of people will respond and comment. And it really is, it feels, I've got a link to a website called unicornsareus.com that
Whoa!
I throw that link in at least 3 or 4 times a week into these conversations, because the link is a website that's basically a long article that goes into just why experienced poly people have a problem with unicorn hunters, and just why that's a problem, and just how difficult throuple is as a setup. So it's just an education piece that I throw out all the time. But so does having it out there in the mainstream make it more accepted? Sure, in that people know we exist. Does it make it easier? No. The learning curve on poly is unbelievably difficult. I've been doing it 10 years. I think I just barely, like 5 minutes ago, figured out how to be reasonably good at being poly. Kinda, sorta, maybe. Even within, my longest current relationship is a 5-year relationship. And oh my goodness, we have had our ups and downs. And a lot of them have been personal growth issues that both of us, but I'm going to own mine, that I have really had to go through. And I just saw a comment that I should try to maybe define the term nesting partner. Your nesting partner is the partner you live with. You may or may not be actually married to them legally. They might be your spouse, they might not. But they could be just your cohabitation partner, nesting partner, the person you nest with in your little cozy feathered nest. We also see sometimes anchor partner, or
Primary
problematically
partner
primary
is
partner.
often a term we throw around. We can definitely
Yeah.
debate the
Cornerstone
merits or
partner,
value of
or-
that idea.
Yeah, that would again be part of the learning curve, where you'll find that most very experienced poly people tend to shy away from primary partner, because what do you have if you have a primary partner? You have a secondary partner.
Or even a tertiary partner.
Ugh. Anybody feel like signing up to be a tertiary partner? Doesn't feel good.
Oh.
So yeah, no, we don't do the primary partner thing. Yeah. So
But
anyway, yeah, there's a learning curve. There's a massive learning curve on poly. It doesn't get easier just because people are aware of it. But there are more resources, and that's awesome. That is a
mhm.
very good thing. For example, there are all these awesome Facebook groups, some not so awesome, and some fantastically awesome, where you can ask your questions to determine who in the situation is actually the problem. Is
Yeah,
it
who is the asshole in this situation?
exactly?
The critical question for every romantic argument.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, in terms of more terminology, you get if you've got, like, for example, I have a partner, a boyfriend. He is married, so his wife is my metamor. It comes from the word paramour. Your paramour is your lover. It's a very old fashioned word for your lover. So their other lover is your metamor. It gets shortened down to meta a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So yeah, I have a fantastic meta relationship. That's a really common bit of jargon that goes around. And in the poly groups, what you often see is somebody posting saying, my meta's doing this terrible thing and it's really annoying the snot out of me. And how do I fix it? And the answer is usually, that's not a meta problem, that's a partner problem, meaning that the shared partner, sometimes called the hinge, because they're the hinge between their two partners, is not holding boundaries nicely and allowing stuff from one relationship to spill over and negatively affect the other relationship. So we have these nice new resources, which is fantastic. There are books, there are podcasts galore. I could probably tell you a bunch of them. So it gets easier in that there is more support, but unlearning the default societal monogamy, toxic monogamy things that you grew up with in your heart and in your head, whoo, that part doesn't get any easier. That is still work.
And honestly, that is a necessary part of all of this in order to make it towards some of the, loftier peaks of, like, for instance, being in a triad or having
Hmm.
what we sometimes refer to as kitchen table poly, where
Yep.
folks are comfortable talking to their metamors and having meaningful relationships beyond just that hinge partner, or having this more expansive notion of what these relationships can look like, requires a lot of learning and a lot of meaningful effort. And I guess that is at least partly why there's something of a stereotype, I believe, around poly people not necessarily wanting to do that work, or wanting to, we talked about the idea of a unicorn hunter and this
Hmm.
notion that a couple would just be looking for, usually stereotypically, some young, dumb, cute, readily manipulated
Bisexual,
bisexual ingenue, for
just
the
to be able to
couple to
love
take
both of
advantage
them
of.
equally, and
Yeah.
yeah, and she can only have sex with both of them at the same time. Nobody can be separate, and like they all have to be in the room, and she can't spend any time with the, one of them without the other one, and God forbid she should ever try to date outside of their closed triad. So she's just had all of her agency removed from her.
Hmm. And that's a common enough idea when people approach polyamory, thinking that it is just like monogamy but with more people, and don't actively, like, sort of deconstruct everything that they have learned so far about relationships. And I guess I lay all of this out just to ask the question: do you feel like the poly community writ large, however we want to try and define that, is made up of activists, of people who are looking to sort of, like, queer broadly our understanding of marriage and of relationships, and that are perhaps up for a fight around marriage equality? Because I think oftentimes there is at least a stereotype of folks preferring to sort of stick to themselves, to have their cake and eat it too, but not necessarily tear down fences or expand opportunities for others. Is that a fair criticism?
I would say it is. I mean, personally speaking, yeah, I would absolutely love it if marriage equality gained legal status, and we could all marry three people because we really wanted to and had examined our hearts and really made the commitment and all of that. I would love it. Am I marching on Washington? No. I'm very busy. I
Yeah.
have two partners and and a full life, and
We're all too
it's
busy
like,
managing our Google calendars
oh
and
my
playing
goodness.
Dungeons and Dragons with each other to actually
Correct.
get around to marching on Washington.
Yep.
Well, with that in mind, though, what are some of the like social and maybe institutional barriers that you've seen or maybe experienced yourself because of your multiple relationships or just your relationship choices in general in this space?
I've generally been very privileged, and I completely acknowledge my privilege. I live in Austin. Living in Austin in the first place, that helps tremendously. What I mean by that is I'm not having to hide. I am absolutely out about being poly in every aspect of my life. Um, at my work, my boss knows, my bosses know, my teammates know. How do they know? Because we're doing work from home. I'm on Zoom. One boyfriend wanders in to say, hey, where's the whatever? And then the next day a different boyfriend wanders in to say, hey, I'm kissing you goodbye, I gotta go. And it's like I'm not hiding anything, they know. And because I work for a very liberal company, because I live in a very liberal town, everybody goes, cool, and doesn't give me any grief about it. I think it could be very, very different if I lived in a small conservative town. I might have to hide more for fear of social censure. I don't. But I certainly hear people in these poly groups talking about how difficult it is to find somebody to date when you can't actually admit that you're poly and you're, supposedly monogamously married. So any attempt to date looks like you're cheating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely see people struggle with that. That has not been my struggle, and I acknowledge my privilege in that regard. That absolutely does help. But for me, it's like I've had so little, such few times that there's been anything that has restricted me. I mean, the closest I think I've gotten to any restriction is that uh, the boyfriend who's married, his wife is not out to her family that they are poly. And it is they are both poly. She has a boyfriend of 7 years that she's very in love with. But in her immediate family, her parents, her sisters, brothers-in-law, they don't know that she's not monogamous. So how has that played out? Been a very few times. The two of them, my boyfriend and his wife, have gone to her sister's house for Thanksgiving a couple of times. And so I didn't get to go along. Okay, well, whatever. I was with my other partner and
Sure.
my mom and my sisters and kids. And, it was fine. It was a few days apart. No big deal. Where it comes into play a little bit more is the few occasions when her sisters have come to visit in town, and she goes in this little frenzy of kind of dekinking the house, um, getting rid of any sex toys and equipment that could be, that makes it pretty clear that there's a lot of sex going on in that house, and things like she'll send him over to my house with a box containing some of my stuff that lives at their house, like my house slippers that live at
Mm,
their house and stuff like that. And I kind of go, it's like it feels a little kicked out for a second,
sure. Yeah.
but whatever. She just doesn't want to have to explain whose bunny slippers those are. Okay, whatever. The funny thing that has happened is it's happened about 5 times now where for whatever reason I have wound up spending the night in their bed and sleeping in what is normally her side of their bed. She's been at her other partner's house, or she's been sick and sleeping in the spare room, or for whatever reason, I wind up spending the night in her spot,
Mm-hmm.
which of course smells like her. And
Sure.
I've known her for 5 years and we're very good friends, and that gets into my head.
Yeah.
And I have these dreams when I sleep in her spot. It's happened 5 times now. I dream that her sisters or her mother or some combination thereof have burst into the room and caught us. And that I'm having to explain who I am and why I'm in her space. And it's become a running joke now that I keep having these recurring dreams of being caught by the only people on the planet that don't know that he and I have a deeply committed 5-year relationship, that I have every reason and right to be in that spot, in that bed. But just funny that my subconscious works that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the stressors that we carry, and just the almost invisible. I mean, I don't know that I want to call that a microaggression, but that is a specific stress that you carry as part of a minority.
Well, if anything, it's my own subconscious doing a microaggression
Sure.
on
Yeah,
me.
that's fair to say.
Nobody else is doing it to me, you know.
Well, you mentioned how a lot of your lifestyle, if we want to call it that, is kind of made possible because you live here in Austin, and
Mhm.
I deeply relate to that. I when I was considering leaving this town, it was terrifying to think about the idea of trying to date polyamorously anywhere else, and I don't know about you, but over the past year or so, I've personally gone from listening to a lot of my friends like threaten to leave Texas to actually having a bunch of people who are close to me and a bunch of clients and other folks in my life actually try and flee the transphobia and some of the other
Mhm.
safety threats that we experience in this state. Just looking at sort of the direction of the country, I mean, how do you feel about the future of poly rights?
Well, for one thing, the folks I see who are leaving Austin are moving to other super liberal places
Right,
in the
sure.
US. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to impact that particular migration. In fact, I've kind of been like, I wonder what the poly scene's like in Seattle,
Yeah.
because I have fished out the
Pretty
pond
vibrant.
in Austin. Let me tell you,
I'm
like,
taking some notes here, places to
yes,
visit in USA.
right. And the thing is, I mean, the dating pool it's only so big. I mean, that being said, there's, like one of the larger poly groups is a national group that has, for all intents and purposes, franchises in various large liberal cities. It's called Poly Cocktails. It's quite well known. And the Austin chapter of Poly Cocktails has a few thousand members in it. That being said, I have already pretty much dated all the ones that could be like reasonable fits for me. It's like
Hmm.
this pond is fished out. So what are the other ponds like? Let's go fishing. I've had that thought, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like you're absolutely right that we do. This movement needs some, for lack of a better term, warriors, and I kind of hate that term because it is warlike and why we got to go there. But it needs some activists,
Sure.
and that's gonna happen naturally. Who's gonna do it? The baby polys, the young ones. I'm deep into my 50s, pushing 60. I'm tired. I'm not marching on Washington. Um, but I see lots and lots of people in their 20s and early 30s who are, most of them, not only poly but also some variety of queer or some variety of gender non-conforming of one kind or another, and they've got to fire up their butt about marching on Washington for other reasons anyway. Throw poly in while you're at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel about it.
So I just wanted to say, do you think that it's much more internationally recognized now? Do you see it having an international flavor to it as well as just a US flavor to it now?
Excellent question. I mean, I know that the big poly groups that I'm in on Facebook do have a lot of non-US based people in them, but no, I don't know the statistics. I'd be really interested to see that.